my goodness, guys, you were up in your feelings about those questions I asked for bell work today about how should we choose a leader, what kind of things should a leader do, and what should we do if the leader doesn't do what we should do, or what they should do rather. We're going to look today in ancient China at the dynastic cycle, the cycle of how in ancient China those leaders were chosen, what they were supposed to do or expected to do, and then what happened when they didn't. So we're going to look at several different dynasties today. I can talk, I promise. Several different dynasties today. And it matters because stable government builds solid growth and strengthens a civilization. So the dynastic cycle and the idea of a dynasty staying strong helped China grow and become powerful for many, many thousands of years. So let's take a look at this dynastic cycle, what it means. We've talked a little bit about it in class that, as long as things are going well, the leaders are on top, and when they start going south, that's when, we might be looking at a new leader. So a strong leader establishes peace and is thought to have that mandate of heaven, that choice from the gods that this is who we want to be leader. So we see Darth Vader here. We're going to use Star Wars as kind of our example today. So Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine were strong leaders. They were in charge. They were military leaders, but they had many followers. Not everybody loved them, but they led kind of through that force. In time, the dynasty grows larger. So over a period of time, the area of land they control grows, and we just start to see that they are gaining more and more power. But then disaster strikes. Could be earthquakes, famines, floods, revolts, invasions. Life is not good for the people under this dynasty. The old dynasty is seen as having lost the mandate of heaven, and maybe there's a rebellion. So we have right here, we've got our rebel forces who are willing to come and take the empire back and give it back to the people, okay? Because all of these things that are going bad, in ancient China at least, were believed to be signs that the gods are no longer pleased with these rulers. They have lost that mandate of heaven. And then eventually, the new dynasty gains power, restores order, and is thought to have the mandate of heaven. So obviously things are going well, they're calm and peaceful, so now the gods are pleased. And so this cycle continues again and again and again. And depending on how much time passes between these 2 points, the dynasty might last for a few years or a few hundred years. But eventually this cycle always goes. When we have a cycle, we have the rise and the fall. It's like a roller coaster, okay? But it keeps continuing. And remember that the mandate of heaven refers to the will or the desires of the gods. It's the thought that this leader, or this leader at the start, has the right to rule because the gods have chosen them. But remember, they can lose that mandate of heaven if things start going wrong. Either natural disasters, or maybe the rulers start making really bad choices and the people are unhappy and they're willing to rebel. Now, hot question for you. Explain to me how the mandate of heaven is related to that dynastic cycle. When the gods are happy, where are we in the dynastic cycle? And when the gods are unhappy with people, where are we in this cycle? And if we have the mandate of heaven, what happens? And if we don't have it, what happens? So now let's look at some important Chinese dynasties. Okay, so there's 4 big ones that we're going to look at, and there's a few things that are going to be really important for you to circle, underline, and really make sure you know for that quiz on Friday. Okay, our Shang dynasty was our first dynasty, and it was active from about 1766 BC to 1045 BC. And they don't have any important leaders kind of individually that we talked about, but they were led by kings and warlords. Now, please put a star by the fact that they were the first dynasty, and they were the ones that had those oracle bones where the priests would write messages to the gods and ancestors on there and then read the cracks. They also had pictographs and ideographs, which are a form of writing, and they invented many uses for bronze, that metal. Okay. So this dynasty is going to be powerful right at some of the time where we see some of our most powerful kings in Egypt. Now, from 1045 BC to 221 BC, we see the Zhou dynasty. And the most important leader was Wu Wang. He was the first one in the Zhou dynasty. But in fact, there were many leaders because this was the longest dynasty. You will need to know that the Zhou dynasty was the longest one. So put a star there. I want you to circle it. The Zhou dynasty was where we got this idea of the mandate of heaven. Before them, there were, belief in gods and all this, but the Zhou dynasty was the first dynasty that said, hey, we are in charge because the gods want us to be. Heaven has made it mandatory for us to be in charge as long as we are good rulers. They also came up with a bureaucracy, which means that instead of just the king being in charge of everything, he would give the power to government workers so that if a king or a certain ruler died, then it would get passed along. Okay, so that mandate of heaven is going to be a very important concept there. The third dynasty is our Qin dynasty. I know sometimes we see it with the Q, sometimes we see it CH. And this is the dynasty we read about with Qin Shi Huangdi. Okay, now he was China's first emperor. He united more of China than almost any other ruler. And he's the one where we get the name China from. Underneath where it says Qin, I want you to write China. Okay? So he had a lot of great accomplishments that we read about. He made currency the same all over China. He built the Great Wall for protection, but he also had swift, harsh punishments. He did not treat his people well, and that's why his dynasty, if we look, was so short. It was only about 15 years. After he died, even though he had all of these great accomplishments and he united China so much, it was decided that we needed a new ruler. Okay, so we're going to see the Han dynasty come next, and they lasted quite a while as well. And if this name sounds familiar, it's because after Han Wudi, the warlord, started it, we see this is the dynasty that really traveled the most on the Silk Road. They practiced civil service, which was those government jobs, and we're going to talk more about what it meant to have a government job in our next video notes. But they were open to anyone, and all you had to do was take a test. They expanded the empire that Qin Shi Huangdi started, and they were the ones who traded along the Silk Road. Okay, so it wasn't until the Han dynasty. So let's over to the side write a couple things here. We're going to say first, longest, China, and silk. Okay, those four key words in order. The Shang was the first, the Zhou was the longest, the Qin dynasty was the ones that united China, and the Han dynasty had the Silk Road. I'll be looking for these four things to be written in by the side of your graphic organizer. Okay, so here is, we know this Silk Road that the Han Empire traveled along. We've been very familiar with that, so we are not going to talk too much about that, but we know that the Han Empire, even after going past the mountains and the desert, were able to trade all the way out there. Okay, so hot question here. Look back at that list of accomplishments, okay, whether it's bronze, the writing form, the civil service exams where you have to take a test to be a member of the government, and tell me which had the strongest impact or effect on your life and why. Now, please make sure that you look over and you read carefully over your lessons 1 and 2 notes. We have that quiz on Friday, and remember, I'm not going to be in on Thursday, but you will not be successful if you don't do your video notes, guys. Please, please, please do your video notes. I'm trusting you. I believe you can do it. All right, guys, I love you. I'll talk to you soon. See you later. Bye.